power carving went really well. It took about 2 hours to carve out the seat and sand it then. So not too bad for being my first time, so pretty happy with it. So I came back in, I had to turn my legs. As you can see, voila. If only it took that short amount of time to turn it. The legs took me about an hour to turn on the lathe, which was quite a while. I didn't want to have to turn more than I needed. I gave a little round over to the bottom of the seat. I kind of wanted to do a bigger round over, like a ½ an inch, but decided against it because I didn't want too much tear out. When I was cutting the angles here, you can see it kind of popped out the side, the inside of the back rail. I was kind of planning on doing some sort of detail to the front of the back. So as you can see, I decided just to give it a little arc on the bottom, which covered up that little boo-boo and gave it a nice little touch. So the back legs, for some reason, were a little bit thinner, I guess. So they snugged up, having to go up further. But that was okay because I gave a little extra inch or two on the legs that I could cut and adjust later. So here I'm measuring out my angles for my stretchers. I was able to measure down 15 inches for the front stretcher because I had a stool that felt like a good height. And then I just used that guide to draw a nice straight line on the leg to reference from. I'm using the calipers to get the same thickness of the leg on each side so I can put my V-blocks at those spots so that I know that the leg is running perfectly parallel with my sled or jig here. I got the idea from someone else online. And I was using tape just to help with the tear out on the bottom. I think it worked pretty good. So I got my little digital level there and just kind of adjusted it till it was the right angle. And then I went for it and cut it. Worked out good. Listen to this beautiful sound. Nice and tight spindles. Now I just gotta get them out. Ugh. Perfect. So I'm now starting to drill my second holes in the legs because they're each getting 2 holes, one for the side stretcher and one for either the front or the back. This is a back leg, so right now I'm drilling the holes for the stretcher from the back leg to the front leg, but I also have to make sure that I am perfectly perpendicular to this hole. And I have my angle set, I have this off, but it's 8.5 degrees for the back legs going towards the front leg, and then the front leg is 9.5. But I'm able to kind of line this hole up with either side of this V-block here to ensure that I am perpendicular for my cut, because I don't want them to be off, because then you'd really see that with the stretchers being bowed or otherwise. So yeah, it works pretty good if I line it up right here and then I have it all lined up, ready to go. It should work out. Fingers crossed. So here I am doing a dry fit, just putting the legs together and then seeing how everything lines up, making sure all the stretchers look level with each other. I measured everything, so they should be, but it doesn't always work out that way, but they turned out pretty good. It's the first time adding the seat on there too. I just rounded over the curved back edges with just by hand, just to give it some nice softer feel, so no soft or rough edges anywhere. So here I had to measure out where wedges would go in each spindle, because they had to line up with the grain pattern of the bottom seat and the curved back. So I had to mark each one. And then I cut them all on the bandsaw. I used the same V blocks for my jig, so I was just able to kind of hold the spindles there. I had to make a lot of wedges, so I looked up different ways to do it, and this is the way I felt like was the quickest and easiest. Just use my crosscut sled, and I had 5/8, 3/8, and 1-inch wedges I had to make. And there's everything before I started gluing it all up. I really don't think the wedges were necessary to make everything stick together, because the stretchers and spindles were all fitting pretty tight. And then when I cut the curves for the wedges, then they weren't as tight, obviously. So then I feel like I was just recreating the tightness that I already had. But I did want the wedges for the aesthetic look anyway, but I really feel like it would be fine without them. Just use the flush cut saw, and then I use the orbital sander to smooth it down. I had to be kind of careful because I was using a somewhat higher grit, and I didn't want it to flatten out a round portion of the leg. Here I use my cut saw disc again to get these legs pretty close to the seat height, and then I use the orbital sander again. Worked pretty good. I did use the card scraper because there's slight hills and valleys still in the seat, so I felt like it helped to level it out and give it a nice smooth finish. So I had to make sure I line up my rear wedge and then get that top wedge lined up too. So all the top wedges along the back are perpendicular to the piece. And whenever you do wedges, basically you're going perpendicular to the grain. Took a while to assemble the whole thing because I had a lot of wedges to put in. I think I cut 22 different wedges. No, 28. Oh, there's 14 spindles, one on each side, which is 28, and then the 4 legs, so 32. I just put the tip of each spindle in the back there, and then put the glue in so I wouldn't have any glue running down, because I didn't want to clean up too much glue on the bottom side of them. And then I hammered it down a little bit. And I checked for level, gave it a quick adjustment, and then I started wedging. Same process here. I used the flush cut saw, get it pretty close, and then I just used the orbital sander to get it the rest of the way then. To get all the legs the same height, I just leveled the chair, and then I went around with a block with a pencil on it all the way around each piece that was at the right height. And then make sure you have a flat surface to do that with though. And then I just cut all the legs along the line. That's pretty good. I did chamfer each leg then with some sandpaper so it wouldn't chip. And blew it off, and then I was ready to apply some finish. As some of you know, I like to use waterlox, so I'm applying that here. It really popped the cherry right away. I was really impressed. I feel like it doesn't always come out that strong. As everything with this chair, it took a good while because it had a lot of spindles, different edges, corners, crevices. Wanted to make sure I got everything. I then, after I finished the first coat, I let it dry for like a day and a half, 2 days. Put on a second coat, and then I let that dry. Basically till it became less tacky. So you can see it gets a little rough just from having the straight oil on there. So when I apply the wax here, I use the 4-0 steel wool, which I feel does a really nice job of just knocking down all the nibs in the finish and giving it a real smooth to the touch feel. And I feel like when I'm sanding it with the steel wool, I'm not trying to get through the old finish. I'm just trying to, rub it down a little bit. And I did 2 coats of wax then, with a few hours in between. I buff it out just with a cloth. I'm giving a final buff to my second coat. You can already see it starting to shine a little bit. Really happy with it. I think it turned out really well, and it's actually pretty comfortable. If anything, it's on the little bit smaller side, but for me, it fits perfectly. Thanks for watching.